Hey everyone, massive welcome to number 2 actually of the day for how to hire in cybersecurity. My name's Simon Linstead. I'm the host and the founder of the InfoSec Live community, and have we got an exciting show for you today. Before we begin though, a little bit of housekeeping. For those of you who are watching the last show, thanks ever so much. Keep up the amazing work. Jump in the comments, ask questions where you can. Let's make this as interactive as possible. And for those of you that weren't in the one before, jump back, jump in. It's up to you. It's all about knowledge sharing, all about trying to get some insight from our industry's leaders, and we've got a very exciting one joining us today. But before we begin, a bit about the InfoSec Live community. We're an independent social network community of 3,000 cyber professionals, all sharing best ideas and practice in what we believe is the world's first dedicated security social network. And this new series is here to help by continuing the theme in our community of sharing those best ideas and practice, this time aimed at addressing the big question out there at the moment, which is how to hire in cybersecurity. So let's get this episode started. A bit about our first guest here. We've got Ryan Pullen joining us, who's the head of cybersecurity for Stripe OLT. As head of cyber for them, it's his role to ensure only the best is delivered to their clients. From managed security operations incident response to penetration testing, Stripe OLT pride themselves on providing an expert cybersecurity service in a language that their clients can understand. Ryan holds a wide range of expertise in multiple disciplines and has a proven track record in understanding clients' needs, being able to design, build, and deliver highly technical bespoke solutions. He runs a high-performance team that covers security operations, incident response, offensive security, open source intelligence, busy man Ryan, cyber consultancy and training across a broad range of technical disciplines for a wide range of markets, including corporate, energy, ICS, leisure, finance, law, aviation, high net worth, and private clients. And very excitingly, only a few weeks ago, I believe, Ryan also did a TED talk called How Clicking a Link Cost Millions. So without more rambling from me, let's play a quick stinger. I'm having problems with my words, everyone, today. It's been a long one. Play a quick stinger and bring Ryan on. Massive welcome, Ryan.
Cheers, Simon. Thanks. That was
You're laughing at my rambling introduction.
I sound all right. But yeah. Thanks for
It's a really, really impressive resume. And before we jump into your background, we were chatting a minute ago off camera, talking about your TED talk, and I've had a really busy day today, but I took out some time to watch that, and it blew me away. So before we start talking about that, gave a bit of an insight into your background, but please tell everyone a bit more about yourself on the personal side. Let's hear about Ryan.
Sure. Well, firstly, thanks for having me. It's really appreciated. This year has been about kind of sharing my view on things, because my journey into how I've got to where I've got to is a little kind of unorthodox, I guess. And I think it's important that people hear that there's not just one way of getting into the industry, And I listened to your talk with Renee last week, and I've been talking to Renee quite a bit recently, because my view on kind of entry-level talent and things like that, because I went to university, but I didn't stay the course, and I managed to get an opportunity through a link that my mum found on Gumtree with a job posting while I was working on a summer camp in America, getting ready to move back to the UK. And it was someone that worked with one of my family members, and they happened to work for a cybersecurity company, and I was specializing in digital forensics and those sorts of things, and it's kind of excelled from there.
Two points from that quickly then. One, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I think we all know that.
To an extent, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and secondly, as I've been telling my 23-year-old son who's just started off in his sales career, activity is very important as well. And even if it's Gumtree or Craigslist or wherever it might be, wherever you're watching, it's important.
That's certainly unorthodox. When my mum found the job description on Gumtree, my dad definitely, for one, didn't think it was all it was made out to be. But then again, it was the opportunity that kind of kickstarted my career, if you like. And then by being someone who says yes to opportunities and tries to kind of strike on them when they present themselves, I landed myself in some cool opportunities, which effectively gave me an accelerated career path, if you like, where it was kind of, there wasn't another option. I had to deal with it.
It's called making your own luck, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think lots of people do that these days, but don't necessarily get talked about. And I've definitely got a few in my own team, which I'm, incredibly proud of, because I think on paper, people, would be, from a very corporate mentality and perspective, they're not going to get through the front door because they've not got the qualification, they've not got the years of experience, they've not got the this, that, and the other. However, they're also driving back after work from 10 hours and putting 4 hours self-study into something that they're passionate about. When you unlock that door for somebody that's passionate, they're very unlikely to let you down. And
You know
so
what you say about the passion, it's also work ethic as well, isn't it? And
absolutely.
you shared I hope you don't mind me sharing this. Kick me on the private chat as I go through if you do. So
No, no,
you
no,
shared, you
you
shared a
give me that,
story
it's
with
fine.
me about one of the methods I suppose you use in recruitment. And one of them was calling people late on a Friday, maybe, or just they're about to finish and see what the response was. And I've thought ever since you said that, what a genius move. And the irony of it is, I ended up speaking to someone who works for you about 3 days later, telling me that they had a call from you on a Saturday.
Yeah,
But it
it
just
doesn't surprise
it
me.
goes to show, doesn't it? We had a CISO one called Adam Bricker, who's based in the US, and he was talking about the importance of that drive to succeed, the passion, the never give up attitude, which seems to be the one that sets people apart from everyone else.
It's for me, my path to where I've got to, whether successful or not, has been through right place, right time, luck, but also kind of taking those opportunities, if you like. And I think the vast majority of my hires that I'm incredibly proud of have come through unorthodox methods, to be honest. Now, that's not scalable for every business. That's not what I suggest every business does by any stretch. But for key impact roles where you are going to be reliant on them, the key for me is, yes, of course, they need to be able to do the job, but you wouldn't be having the conversation if you didn't think they could fulfill that. You need
Correct.
to understand if you can trust them. And so realistically, my entire team focus is based on trust and relationship and integrity. And the bit around phoning people out of hours, now that's not as calculated as it may seem, but what it tells me,
Subconsciously, I reckon it is.
maybe, but subconsciously, what that tells me is how are they going to act under a situation which is unexpected initially? How are they going to act on a first impression basis? So, if I'm calling you because you've reached out or whatever, and we're discussing a role opportunity. Now, that first impression means an incredible amount to me,
Yeah,
because if you've got someone who really, really needs your help, and they're from one of the clients that we support from a 24/7 basis, and they're a senior stakeholder, I want to know how you communicate. I want to
yeah.
know, yes, you're important and all of those sorts of things. Now, I've also interviewed people 10 minutes before they've been out for dinner, and it's been absolutely fantastic
It's the
because they're
same
like,
person, isn't it?
the taxi's going to wait, and some of those things. But um,
I think again, I mean, and I don't want to make it sound bad, right? I've painted a bad picture there that you're this aggressive recruiter type, and you're not, because you certainly, you've got to take into account as well. If you ring people up and they say, "Look, I've got 5 minutes, I'm now going out," of course you're going to appreciate that as well. So for anyone watching who's now worried they're going to get calls at the weekend for jobs, don't panic. It's all right.
it's not about that at all. It's typically, for me, my hiring strategy is focused towards, and I think I spoke to you about this, Simon, when we discussed offline. But I want to know that you're passionate about the topic in hand, and for me, that's the foundation, because it might be a topic that I'm not the specialist in, but if I can ask you a question and you can go into a certain level of granularity where it sounds like you're confident in that ability, and then I can ask you another specific question based on that information, and
Dig a
then
bit,
one
dig a bit deeper, I suppose. Yeah,
exactly, you can go to that third layer. What that shows me is you've either been burnt by that in the past and you've learned from it, and it's either a mistake that you don't want to make that mistake again, or it's something that you're incredibly passionate about, and given the opportunity to work in that domain, it's unlikely that you're going to pass up on that opportunity and let yourself down more than anyone else. And so I kind of learned that from Elon Musk. I listen to kind of a 60-second clip around the way he approaches things, because it's not necessarily about the piece of paper and those sorts of things. Now,
Yeah.
because of my journey, I think that's why I kind of take that approach. And there's one of the guys in the team that specifically who worked in like a manual labor position previously, and he was really pushing it to get out of that kind of career line, and wasn't enjoying it, was working outside in the rain and those sorts of things, and he was self-studying in the evenings. Now, that's because that was of interest. And when you ask that individual about why they want to do this and what their passions are and why they're getting into this field, you understand that they're going to have the best interest of the client at heart. And when that situation is tough, they're not going to stop at the first hurdle. And some of those more personality-led qualities, which is what I look for, and don't get me wrong, like I'm not trying to detract away from the conventional pathway of education led and then work experience and then getting your opportunity. We've got people from that background as well. But I think there's not enough visibility of different ways into the industry, if you like. And that's why I kind of reached out to you to share this, because I think from a few different people's perspectives, those are the people that bring all sorts of different life experience to those issues and problem solving kind of situations. And I think that's really, really powerful.
I completely agree. And you mentioned people who value the role that they've been given, taken from perhaps, I think you said a manual labour background. One of the top technical testers at Bramfit, where I'm working at the moment, who tests all of the IoT devices, does technical pen tests. He worked at Halfords as an electrical engineer mechanic for like a decade before. And he's not only the most loyal, hardworking employee, he just thinks out of the box. He doesn't have that. He's got qualifications now that he's passed, but he has that ability to critically think. And I think, again, that's something that we see missing in some candidates and not talked about enough, is the ability to have critical thinking.
I completely agree. And I think I've seen, you see those posts on LinkedIn where it's like an entry level role and you need 10 years experience. Now, I'm not sure how few and far between those are. I don't spend my time myself looking into those things, but there is plenty of opportunities out there which, myself included, wouldn't necessarily qualify for the role. Yet I've kind of advised the entire organization on strategy, let alone would I get jobs in their team, kind of thing, if you know what I mean. And so I find it really interesting that those requirements, where most job applications now in this field, in the security domain, particularly from a technical specialization, they say we want a bachelor's degree or equivalent experience. Now, that equivalent experience is in the eye of the beholder. Now, many people from a hiring position may not actually, understand what relevant experience is, because it's a HR process and they want to kind of interpret those results. And so that's down to you to kind of interpret that information in a way where it can be digested very, very quickly. And so with CV writing, it's really key. For me, I don't hire based on CVs, really. Like, I hire based on, do I trust you through interview? Now, of course, the CV is, your screening process naturally. But it's really important to get across that passion and that admiration for the role that you wish to move into and whatever that key end goal and focus is, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree. Dhruva, how are you, my friend? You've got a question there. I'm just going to bring that up. And then I've got some other questions that were dropped in LinkedIn earlier that I want to get to as well. So, Dhruva, how do employers validate the drive and passion that the candidates' employees have? An example would be myself. 3 years since I started exploring cyber, and I study about random topics which I come across in cybersecurity every single day. Demonstrate it.
It's a fantastic question. And realistically, each employer is going to be very, very different. And the truth of the matter is, one of the recent roles that I had open. So I've got 2 security analyst roles open at the moment to join my team.
Oh, okay. Let me drop your LinkedIn details in the chat then. Sorry, carry on.
But previously, around 2 months ago, I put a post out and I had about 260 applications. Now, The ones that take my attention is the ones that say, I've been doing this, I've been researching into this, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I want to kind of do long term, this is where I want to go. Because from them I can help teach the skills. I can't teach passion, I can't teach integrity, and I can't teach trust, and I can't teach work ethic, really.
Right.
Like no one really can. Like you can't drag someone uphill backwards. And so
I've tried that with some of my children. It's just not worth the hassle.
if you can denote those things in that short message, then you've probably got someone's attention. Now, not everybody hires in that way. They hire through Workday and they hire through those long form submissions. And I think it's very important that you kind of try and denote that through those forms, because to be honest, it's really challenging. But what I would do if there was a role that you found online, I would try and contact the hiring manager. I would try and get in contact with them as a personal basis, because otherwise you're casting your hat into the ring along with everybody else. And 90% of those people haven't tried that. Now, you might not get lucky on every single occasion, of course, but I think that's worth doing because people understand that, and they understand the time you've put in. Like I've messaged some people today to say, I'm sorry, I've not managed to put your details in front of the right person. And that happens, but at the same time, I'm going to do it because I've been communicating with them. And so how do they validate the drive and the passion? Personally, I do it through conversation. I want to talk about things that you're passionate about. I want to talk about the self-study projects that you've done, because then I'm going to ask you.
I think the problem Druva's having, sorry to interrupt you, Ryan, but I know Druva was on earlier, and the problem he's having is that he's sent out lots and lots of resumes.
Sure.
And not really got anywhere. Thinks he's having a problem with the screening process. And again, I'm interested to know how many jobs out there are filled before they're advertised on job boards through existing relationships and that networking piece. You know, you say about building up trust is important to you, which you do through the interview process. If you can demonstrate that you're trustworthy, you apply yourself, you've learned things which you can relate to a job, and you're passionate. Again, it's demonstrating that online, I think, unfortunately now seems to be the thing to do.
It's very tricky. You know, employers are now able to recruit over the internet, and they're able to do that very, very quickly. You don't have the ability to have that interpersonal connection with in-person interviews all the time. Typically, that's kind of key stakeholder directorship roles where they're going to take you out for dinner or whatever, and that kind of level of engagement for people starting out it is incredibly challenging, because it's how much do you get over the line in that 30-minute period, really.
Absolutely. So for those looking to build out their network then, to try and establish, who do you reach out to? Where do they start? You know, you've got all these people in the cybersecurity industry. How do you hone it down to areas that are important to you and that might benefit you?
Again, a great question. If I was starting again, knowing what my experiences, and I could be missing the mark because I'm not actually in that position. But if I was starting again right now, and I look at how the people in my team have been hired, they've made themselves available. They've shared their thoughts on recent industry events. They've showed that clear kind of that real passion for understanding the recent events of what's happening in the cybersecurity industry. It's very fast. It's very, very quick. And for me, that shows that you can't really teach that. You're either interested or you're not. And so the people who are up researching Log4j when it's happening, and the people up researching the Twitter breach when it's happening, and it's happening at 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, that's not expected. Those are very, very unique situations that happen in isolation. But if you went into an interview and said, that Log4j vulnerability blew my mind, and I was watching John Hammond's clips on YouTube about it, and I was watching...
demonstrates the passion.
Exactly. And then I'm instantly bought into that. Now, again, very hard to convey in paper format. And so that's why I think speaking to people, getting advice from people like Renee, talking to candidates every single day, helping you stand out. I put a post on LinkedIn recently about how you stand out, and it's kind of reiterated what I've been talking about today. Approaching things slightly differently, trying to speak to the individuals. Again, really challenging to do, and I understand that. But it is possible, because this happened to me multiple occasions. One of my guys literally emailed the kind of marketing address and said, I want a job. This is what I'm about. Here's the final year project. Here's a link to it. And I thought, fair play. If you're writing to me in in your own time, and it's found its way to me, and I think that looks strong. And now he's had 2 promotions, and he's in one of our infrastructure security teams, basically.
Wow, what a nice story. And that you hear more and more of them, I think, don't you? But only when people are open-minded enough to take the approach that you are, perhaps. Now, we've got a few more questions in there, I think. So, Jonathan Kipping, hi, Jonathan. Thanks for tuning in. From a technical standpoint, what would make a candidate stand out to you?
From a
Depends, I suppose.
yeah, it depends what the role is, right? And so if you're talking about
Let's go for pen tester because this is what I
okay,
wanted to be when I grew up.
sure. So that certificate behind me means I was qualified at one time to do pen testing and
All
things.
right, bragging with your certificate. You know,
No,
I
no, no,
haven't got
it's expired now. But, but what I think is really important for pen testers is understanding that you're actually performing for a client most of the time, unless you're working for an internal role. And
Yeah,
so the ability to be able to conversate and explain your issues, sorry, not your issues, but the vulnerabilities that you've
yeah,
identified is paramount, because
yeah.
you can be the most technical person, but if you can't translate that into useful context for the client, it's going to be really hard for you to really kind of get
And,
momentum.
and and again, it depends who the client is, does it? Is it the developer team? Is it a CISO? Is it is it a small firm? Is it a big firm? Again, it's having the ability to be able to talk to different people at different levels as well, isn't it? Which I suppose again is something that
Absolutely.
you can dig deeper on through the interview process. And Chimeri has mentioned soft skills are very important to me. I can learn the technical skills. How do you look at military service with a candidate? It's a good question, Chimeri.
That is a fantastic question, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm a huge advocate of tech.
Seamless that was, Chimeri. Thank you.
um, just coming back to Jonathan's point around technical competency, it really depends on the role and looking at the requirements. I'm a technical individual, but I wouldn't sit here and say I know any coding language in particular. I can make my way around for sure, but
Yeah.
I have people in my teams who are way more proficient
I can
in.
use Metasploit. Does that count?
But exactly. So understanding how Metasploit works and being able to
Yeah.
talk about the methodologies, that's really important. And it,
Yeah.
and it kind of denotes what you're about.
Where I fall down is where you ask that next level question. So let's not go there.
So coming back to the military background, we have lots of kind of ex-military personnel, if you like, from all different backgrounds, all different disciplines. And
Is that
the
just in
reason,
the UK, Ryan, or is that globally? I'm not sure how big Stripe are.
so UK at the moment, yeah.
Yeah.
So all at one point, the majority of our team was fulfilled with people from the tech vets community, which is a
Love
community
tech
of
vets.
some people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've had their CEO on the show before. Really, really nice guy.
James is a great guy.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned his name because I'd forgotten what it was. Sorry, James.
he actually messaged
James
me.
Murphy. Remembered.
That's the one.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
one. So the reason why I think they transition so naturally. Now, I can't really comment with how difficult this is, because people come from all different walks of life and all different challenges, right? And I don't want to undermine the challenges that can present. However, what I do believe is they are used to ever changing circumstances. And so ever changing circumstances is my every single day and every single hour, most of
yeah,
the time. And so if you're used to that, it's like I would hire someone from a nursing background because they're used to things changing so rapidly and
yeah.
being able to perform in those circumstances. I cannot tell you what's going to happen in the next hour. Our team is 24/7, and we have support mechanisms in place where people are responding to incidents
I take it
effectively.
you're not talking about an accident emergency nurse dealing with drunk people at 3 a.m. It's not like that.
But genuinely, if you had that
No,
previously and you went
agreed.
through like a career transitioning program like Caps Lock, for example, if you did that, then I know from a personal perspective, you have some of the qualities that I'm after, because that ever changing circumstance is really, really key.
Yeah,
Because like some of our foundational key team members have come from different career paths where you wouldn't expect them to be, deeply technical or whatever else. But that's the thing that they draw most of their experience from and bolt on the technical bit, because I can teach people tech, but I
yeah.
can't teach people how to read a situation very, very quickly when they've got a CEO on the phone, not understanding why their account's locked out or something like that.
I completely agree. I think
And
Kerry, you're jumping in there. Kerry's got military background, military service in the US.
Sure.
Also background in retail, and has extensive IT experience from a hands-on perspective of fixing computers. But he's still struggling. And again, I think, Kerry, for you, it's back to there's so myriad of options out there for studying. And I know the market in the US is a little bit different from the UK when it comes to what certifications employers want, etc. But again, Kerry, you're doing, in my opinion, all the right things, which is jumping in the community, jumping into chats, demonstrating, talking about in InfoSec Live what you've learned. And there are, 3,000 people in there now, and even more on LinkedIn, who are watching what you're doing. So it won't be long before you get picked up.
Just on the retail piece, I think this is one of the biggest understated things on CVs. Like I'm looking for the thing that you don't necessarily want to talk about most of the time, which is irregular, and partly why I wanted to talk here today. I'm not looking at the key things. One of the recent interviews that I did, now I learned a lot about different situations and handling things from when I worked in the US on a summer camp when I was way, way younger. But I was presented with all sorts of different challenges. And one of the people that I interviewed had that on their CV. They were ready for all these sorts of technical questions. I didn't want to talk about that because I want to understand the person first. And then if you tick those boxes, then we can figure out, are you passionate about this topic?
Yeah.
If yes, then okay, well, let's rock and roll. And so I think having experience in retail. So in the UK, if you've worked in a pub, I think you've been through some stuff, right?
Yep.
And I think
Really agree.
if you've worked in a pub, or you've worked in a supermarket, or you've worked in retail, people probably haven't treated you nicely at times, and you've had to deal with conflicting circumstances.
Yeah.
Hopefully not aggression, but challenging circumstances.
Probably in a pub, Ryan, let's be honest. Yeah.
But challenging circumstances as a whole, right? And I think people really, you'd get some CV advice that says only put things that are relevant. That's relevant to me because I know that you've had challenging circumstances where you've had to deal with individuals and in conflict.
Objection handling, conflict resolution.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So in the sales world, that's massive. How do you deal with objection on a consistent basis and all those sorts of things? And dealing with people like that doesn't transpire into cybersecurity like naturally. But when you have someone who's on the phone and they do not know what to do, you are the only person that can help them because that they're in that panic state. You don't raise that panic levels, and you understand their situation, and you're asking calming questions, and you can then systematically figure out what the next logical steps are. That's really, really key. And so having that kind of experience, probably when you're 18 or 19 or something like that, your first job, that can transpire really, really like fundamentally for me. Now, I don't know, big consultancies and things like that on paper, I don't know if they see things the same way. But
unfortunately not. But I certainly agree with you. I mean, I look back to my first roles, I suppose, when I left school. And first one was knocking on doors, selling mobile telephones when they were this big. What do I want one of them for? Was kind of what you got a lot of. And then it was double glazing or home improvements, where I did canvassing for 2 years, where you can earn a lot of money as long as you don't mind having doors slammed in your face and being told to F off every 10 minutes because you're annoying people. But what you learn there, whilst, I mean, it's funny, you look back at what you've learned when you were younger, doing jobs that you hated, that you didn't want to do. And then I think it's Steve Jobs' speech, Connecting the Dots, where he talks about all the things he's learned throughout his life. And then you get to a point where they all start coming together, and you shouldn't discount that. And I think I've learned more from some of the terrible jobs that I've hated in the past than I have the ones that I've earned the most money at and found the easiest, perhaps.
I think it's really interesting, right? Because I think the biggest thing for me, and one of the challenges that the industry is facing at the moment, is one of the guys in my team told me that they went through 4 or 5, don't quote me on it, but 4 or 5 rounds of interviews for a junior position. Now, I find that really, really challenging because from a business perspective,
waste of time.
the cost of internal process, the time taken, the cost of travel probably back then, and some of those things, I don't know what those 4 interview processes are going to show you. So at which point you go, yeah, he's the person, or no, they're not the person.
Maybe just whoever turns up for the 4th one's got the tenacity to keep going. I don't know.
Now, I understand from senior positions, director positions, because
of course,
business units, right? But for entry people, there is an expectation, sorry, that you're going to need to invest into them for training. There's an expectation that you're going to need to guide and manage and nurture and coach and mentor, one of the above. Now, putting someone through 4 rounds of interviews could be deemed character building and experience and all of those sorts of things.
Or soul destroying.
Or or are you actually seeing the differences throughout that interview process? Are you actually getting any additional value? Are you asking different questions? Now, for me, I make my decisions very, very quickly, mainly based on gut, because I know they're coming in on an entry level role. They have a notice period to protect them if we're not the right employer, and to protect us if it's not the right fit and I've made a mistake. Thankfully, that's a rare circumstance, right? But it does happen. But that's it's in their interest and in your interest most of the time, and you can do right by people if that does occur. But why put them through 4 rounds of interviews if you think they're 80-90% and you think you can make them into something for a long term, if you're going to invest in them appropriately, or they're going to be with you for 18 months and you've let yourselves down. And so this whole stigma about retention and we need to do more to retain staff, I don't think people leave good jobs.
No, they
And
don't.
so I don't think you need to do retention. I think you just need to be decent and provide actual, opportunity and challenges and that kind of relationship building team environment where people feel fulfilled. And so it's a few different points there, but I think they're all very kind of synonymous.
Agree. And I think for different people, I mean, we all have different drivers, don't we? But I think,
Of course,
deep down, we all want to be valued as well. And I think in bigger organizations, I mean, some of them are very good at it. But again, I suppose you see with bigger organizations, very siloed areas of expertise and excellence. You've got one managed team who's brilliantly managed. And then again, it's down to people, isn't it? It's just down to people. And while we're talking about people, Jonathan Kipping made a comment saying dealing with drunk people is a tough job, speaking from personal experience. I haven't had a drink for 3 years now, Jonathan, so it wasn't me causing you trouble unless it was about 4 or 5 years ago. But you're completely right. I find socializing with drunk people now very difficult because I don't drink. And I think, again, it's back to culture, isn't it? Because if you join a firm where excuse me, a lot of their culture is going out team building on a Friday and drinking in the pub. I mean, for me, that isn't ideal, but it doesn't mean you couldn't do the job. But do you want to be in a culture where normal people who go out and have fun every week, when people like me who don't want to have a drink again, is something that needs thinking about, perhaps?
You've mentioned a great point there around, the cultural basics. And for me, a big part of the hiring process is, are you going to fit within the team? Because the team are your biggest driver. You don't want to let them down. You operate within that structure. And because we're quite agile in the way that we deliver our services, it's very important that you are a part of that team player mechanism and understand that level of responsibility. And I recently read a book called The Ideal Team Player.
I saw you post that last week, and I've got it on my list.
Yeah, it's really changed the way I kind of summarize and identify people's strengths and weaknesses, really. And in the book, I recommend you read it, but it talks about 3 individual qualities, and it assesses you against humble, hungry, and smart. And so, are you humble with that personal intelligence, that kind of personal mechanism to understand the way that other people operate and understand their values and the way that they see things? The smart piece is very much focused towards those individuals as well and how you operate in a team, but much more to that kind of emotional intelligence area, not so much the humble piece, which is, I'm not going to make it about me, it's about the team. And then the hunger side, that's where that's the Friday night phone call. It's the stuff. That's that piece.
We've given away your secret weapon, Ryan, haven't we?
It's only happened 3 times, but those 3 times have been massively successful. So
it proves it works, doesn't it? Just jumping back in the chat, I've just dropped a link for the book in there. The next link I'm going to drop in after we've addressed the question that's just come up is the recent link to Ryan's TED Talk. And for anyone, don't watch it while we're doing this because that's just rude. But as soon as it's finished, make sure you jump across and watch. I think it had like nearly 40,000 views as well, Ryan, which I'm extremely admiring of and slightly jealous of as well, because I was pleased to hit 1,650 subscribers the last couple of days and then saw how much you'd smashed your TED Talk, which is, you must be like blown away by how many people have seen that.
I mean, I'm greatly appreciative of the opportunity for sure. And I'm also thankful for the kind of platform to be able to share some of the basics and some of the things that people, in your family may not understand and those sorts of things. I actually did the recording back in, I think it was March. Yeah, it was back in March, but they were waiting for the right moment to release it and to put it in like the editor's picks and all of those sorts of things because it's relevant now and it's happening a lot.
It's topical, certainly topical. And there's two things in particular I want to draw people's attention to when they watch it. One is the awesome delivery and the content that Ryan puts out. But the second one, Ryan's your jacket. Love the jacket, by the way. And my wife said, because she watched the last half with me, I've got something similar in the wardrobe that I can't quite fit in anymore. She went, oh, look at his jacket. Isn't it lovely? So just thought I'd mention that. So now I've stopped commenting and complimenting you on your dress then. We've got a question from Dima. Hi, Dima. When selecting personnel, do you privilege people or prefer people with the most knowledge in different fields of computer science, such as networking, software development, cloud, and fog computing, etc.?
Good question. And it depends on the role. And I'm sorry to play that sitting on the fence mentality, but it does, it is important for the role. So what I will say, if it was a security operations role like I have open at the moment, so we've got 2 roles open at the moment because we're continuing to grow, which is fantastic, but presents all sorts.
And how do people find out more about those roles, Ryan? Is there a link I can drop in the chat for those? Or?
There is. It's somewhere on LinkedIn, but to be honest, send me a message and I'll put it in front of the right people.
I'll drop your LinkedIn in here now because the other one's got lost in the massive amount of amazing comments we've had in there. Look, let's move on to the TED Talk because I want to talk about this because it's actually one of my favorite subjects and what I think is one of the biggest problems we've got in the industry, and that is, let me do this first because I can't do 2 things at once. Copy, paste. The human element. So the title of the talk was, where are we? You can tell me what the title is if you like, Ryan, while I'm looking for the right piece of paper here. It was how clicking a link cost millions. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. And one of the quotes you came out with in that talk, and I won't ruin all of it for people who want to watch, but make sure you do click on the link and look at that. It was 95% of cyber attacks utilize the human element. Let's talk about that, and let's talk about the talk.
Sure. So what that's really denoting is that most successful cyber attacks, being 95%, I think it was IBM that did a study in 2021, if I remember my statistics correctly, is enabled somehow by an individual. And the 5% that aren't are kind of your external point and click, Metasploit driven, open web proxy, open admin page, kind of log in and cause some damage. That's reasonably rare now. It does still exist. We do still find things on external pen tests and those sorts of things, but it's more rare. Those are the kind of things that you're going to find open ports on Shodan or something like that. The rest of them are more targeted or not targeted, but more drive-by focused, where the human element is being exploited, if you like. And so I talk about a few different case studies and a few different examples from different perspectives, but all of them target human kind of intelligence, vulnerability, the way people operate, and how those things can actually be manipulated for your own personal gain. One of the situations, I was targeted as an individual, and it's because I'm a pessimist and a skeptical person that I didn't
realistic
for it. Well, maybe, but I go through like the basics of the foundationals, understanding the difference between reusing passwords and making sure that you're using multi-factor authentication. That's the big one. Realistically, 95% of attacks do use the human element. However, I think I don't know a statistic, but it's something like 96% of potential attack frames. So part of a kill chain within the MITRE attack framework or something like that are stopped because of MFA. So of those successful ones, 95% of them have either targeted the human to enable that to happen. An example of this, sending a phishing link, they type in their username and password, the malicious actor goes to log in because they've got the username and password. They then get an MFA prompt because they've logged in and they think it was them logging in. And so an automated process sends that profile, a push notification, the user pushes the notification, then they can go in and change the password and keep themselves persistent. And so that's happening an awful lot. And that's, banking scams, personnel identity theft, initial access brokers, all those sorts of things. And that's a huge one at the moment, initial access brokers.
But it's back to the education piece, isn't it? I talk about this a lot, so I don't want to harp on about it too much, but I've only been in the industry for 18 months, and I went to my first big conference this year, which was RSA. And 75% of that massive hall was full of buzzwords around, rightly so, I suppose, if you look at it properly. Zero trust for one, and shift left was probably the other one that you saw the most. And the budgets behind the companies out there who are selling the products are selling solutions like silver bullet solutions. Not all of them, and I don't want to get specific and get sued by any vendors out there. But really, in my opinion, the first place you should be doing any investment after processes and controls, of course, is education of your workforce and leading that from the top, surely.
I think, it's that never-ending chase, right? And I think people have lots of different perceptions on phishing in particular. Is it beneficial? Is it not? Do we kind of inhibit behaviors that we don't actually want because of, we're trying to assess our people? And this is one that now has become a kind of a HR metric, right?
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of different ways of doing it. And some are more beneficial than others, but you're absolutely right. Understanding who may need some additional training because they may be a key target or key focus area. The age-old story. Now, I can say this because I've been in this position, but it's a bit of a stereotype. It's those people of public kind of importance. So your senior stakeholders and those sorts of individuals needing admin rights and kind of opening up bigger sense of vulnerability. Now, you could kind of talk about that in a spear phishing sense as whaling. So people with influence and interest being able to make kind of financial decisions, right? And so if you reduce their level of kind of defense mechanism, you're opening yourselves up to more vulnerability because of they need to be able to do their job. Now, availability is huge. So if you're talking about the CIA triangle, availability for them to be able to conduct their tasks is absolutely imperative. Don't get me wrong. But I've seen lots of organizations do that in a way where they're afraid for asking. Now, I think if you ask...
So there's too many unneeded permissions going on out there.
I think if you ask...
higher echelon.
They've hired you to be able to do your job. And that's about the enablement culture and all of those sorts of things where you hired someone to do their job, don't tell them that you're exempt from that policy, right? And training and education is absolutely foundational and it changes all the time. I actually deliver training courses for different specialisms and different kind of audiences, largely the executives, to make them not make them, but provide guidance and awareness into how simple some of these things can be. And so I'll drag out some old kind of dark comet 2008 malware and show them when you click on a link, it can take over your machine and some of those things. Now, that's more to give them an understanding around the level of impact if that was to occur and why some of the advice coming from your IT, your security, your InfoSec, those kind of departments are justified. And there's no silver bullet, like you said. Every organization is different. You can have super high walls, but your insider threat could be your biggest risk.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of that model of zero trust, like you just said, a model of least privilege and defense in depth and all of those sorts of things. And when you're in a real kind of security program of maturity, you're from an assumed breach position where kind of everyone's untrusted almost, which is in the upper echelon of kind of security programs, if you like. But education is foundational.
Buzzword hat.
It's true though. It's
Yeah,
absolutely true. You don't want to just, I was on a job once, and I was able to effectively break into the internal network because it was hosted over wireless environments from a car 400 meters away with a 15 pound wireless dongle in a car that I'd hired.
yeah,
Now, that's once in a blue moon potentially, but it probably happens more often than you think. But at the same time, that's why you don't trust your network perimeters in the same way that we may have done 10 years ago, because your end point is the what you want to protect, not necessarily where you connect to. Is the mentality of kind of zero trust, and that asset is an individualistic entity, and it connects into the cloud and a whole bunch of other buzzwords that we probably don't want to go into.
love a buzzword. I've got a whole collection of T-shirts with buzzwords on that I wear around the house every day. There's a few comments in the chat. One, I don't know if I should say this out loud or not, but I'm going to. So, Charlie, social engineering aspect of InfoSec is what you wrote your dissertation on. I'd love to hear more about that, Charlie. You can patch systems, but patching people's a lot harder. So, for those that didn't hear on how I broke into this industry, it was by using social engineering. So, without giving you the whole story, I was helping my 13-year younger and slightly more attractive than me wife market her business. And I may have been pretending to be her on Facebook. And I was approaching cybersecurity companies for video marketing services. Introduced myself to a guy called Ben Brown, who heads up running Pentest down in Brighton. Was honest with him straight away that I wasn't actually an attractive brunette in my 30s. I was a near 50-year-old, balding, slightly overweight man. And that honesty obviously helped. But what happened, I ended up heading up his whole global sales. And that's how I got into the industry. So it was from sending a request on Facebook, pretending to be someone else, that got me the job. And whilst I'm not encouraging people to lie, I'm just trying to explain the power of, connecting with people through whichever way you can sometimes can help.
It's odd, isn't it? And kind of that social engineering piece is, Charlie, foundationally I agree, and that's why my mechanisms of hiring are driven in that way, because is the individual the right person for my team, and then I can educate in the discipline, and the team are fantastic, and so they're going to train them better than I can, and so I just need to find the right people that we can educate and enable long term, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Sorry, I was trying to do two things at once then, so I didn't hear the last 30 seconds of what you said. I'm really bad at this. Considering
No
I've
problem.
hosted like nearly 100 events now, you thought I'd have got used to it, wouldn't you? We've got some other questions. Let's just bring those up quickly. So, Druva, you mentioned the fact we need to do another Fetian giveaway. So, I have actually still got, if anyone's interested, I was given a box full of Fetian devices, multi-factor authentication devices. Some are biometric, some are different. But if anyone wants one, we'll do a little giveaway. So drop in the chat. I've got three, I think. So first three in the chat who says they want one, I'll post one out. There you go. How's that? Done, Druva. I expect you'll be the first in the chat there as well. And Ephraim, who is, I think I've introduced him to you. And if I haven't, Ryan, I desperately need to. So, just a bit of framing here. Ephraim is doing a degree in the UK. His family moved over here, I think, about 9 to 12 months ago. He is one of the brightest candidates I've ever spoken to. If I get any of this wrong, Ephraim, you'll have to tell me afterwards. I think he's 19 years old. He's won every OSINT challenge in our community that we've done. He's one of the brightest, most affable, and eloquent speakers I've come across, especially since I have a 23-year-old and a 17-year-old son. So I've got something to compare that to. The guy is amazing. So if I haven't connected you, I'll connect with you afterwards. But what would make a student more horrible to you besides the certain degree? Thanks, Ephraim.
Everything I've been talking about
Yeah.
around your personal projects, your interests, and your passion, so things that can denote what you are encouraged by, why you want to be in the industry, because then you can really put those two and two together. Because if you enable someone to be able to focus on their passion long term, knowing that they've got the foundations of certifications, and I'm not here to naysay on qualifications and certifications and those sorts of things. They definitely have their place, but what I'm trying to say is that's not the only way to get in into the industry. It certainly helps. Absolutely, it certainly helps.
I think, Ephraim, you really doing yourself a discredit there, because you've just jumped in the chat and said you're 18. All right, well, my bad. Sorry about that. Mate, even more proving my point on how good you are. And your English isn't that good. That's absolute nonsense, by the way. I've had a face-to-face conversation with you. So it's back to imposter syndrome we can talk about now quickly, shall we, seeing as Ephraim's lined it up. Do you come across that much in the industry? Because historically, or typically, not historically, typically, I think people tend to be more introverted than extroverted in this industry, and it might be a good thing for us to talk about.
Everyone has an element of it, right?
Yeah,
I believe people in different capacities, and myself included. There's been times where you kind of experience that layer where there's always going to be someone that either wants to be difficult, a job's worth, whatever you want to call it, based on something that you're sharing, right?
yeah.
And there's always going to be the person that invented the product and work back from there. So there's always going to be that person that knows more than you about that thing, most of the time, unless you find that vulnerability or something like that. Now, you can't just kind of focus on those elements, because the context in which you pride in that information. So, for example, that CEO's phoning you. You can't be worried about what someone else will do, because that's you in that situation. And so that's the enablement of trust, and me saying to my team in my situation, you can handle this better than I can, or you know more about this challenge than me because you've been
But
working.
that's a skill, Ryan. It took me probably till 3 years ago, 45 years old, to work out that I wasn't the best at everything, because I was driven by that stupid ego and arrogance. You've clearly worked that out pretty soon. How did you work that out? Let's stick on that. So a lot of people get very hung up, especially the entrepreneurial sort like ourselves, in we like to keep doing everything ourselves and keep control over it. What taught you the benefit of relying on people who know more and accepting that?
I guess realizing that I'm just not very good at lots of things.
So I love the honesty. It's what I mean. Yeah, it was a
For
realization
example,
for me as well.
like there was some new technology out that we were going to be using to deliver our product, going back like kind of 3 years. And I recognized that I wasn't going to be the person to kind of drive that. I had the vision. I could provide the capability for people to be able to learn it kind of without any barriers. And so they could run at it 110% and not worry about failure. And therefore, they're taking the accountability. I'm not taking on any management debt. And I'm still the accountable person at the end of it, but they don't want to kind of let you down. And so I think it's through making mistakes that you understand that you can't do this by yourself.
Yeah.
And
That's what I've
understand
been trying to get you to say.
lots of people are, specialists in their certain areas. So, for example, I can provide advice based on security strategy or certain things, but I've not been on the tools necessarily. Now, I still dabble for sure because I like it and I'm very passionate about it. But I would seek advice from my team, because that's why I hire them. I hire people better than myself in those specific disciplines to do that job. Now, that comes with a certain level of, I guess, opposite to imposter syndrome, because I know that they are more capable than I in that specific field, but then I can help them in different ways by communicating technical challenges to non-technical personnel or something like that.
And it's knowing what strengths to play on that you've got,
of course,
and which ones to draw on for other people. And you hit the nail on the head. It's learning from failures, isn't it? And for anyone out there who's failed an exam recently or had any kind of failure, it isn't a failure. It's a huge learning opportunity, in my opinion.
A-levels,
I can say that because I've failed at lots of things.
A-levels, GCSEs, all of those kind of things is kind of the same. Now, that doesn't feel like it at the time, but that's for the parents to kind of understand that it doesn't necessarily define them and all of those sorts of things. So that's really, really challenging, because I can't think of a particular instance. I've benefited from the people I work with. I also have, incredible relationships with those individuals where I trust implicitly. They're the people that can tell me the really hard things, and you take it as support, less so criticism, if that makes sense. And so the ideal team player was recommended I read it because I wanted to build high performance teams and those sorts of things. Same with the Chimp Paradox, same with Your Next 5 Moves, same with a few other books. that are really, really foundational to how you operate with human intelligence and kind of that leadership. Simon Sinek is the person that, you know, I talk about his books a lot because there's a very, very key clip. It's about 35 seconds long where he's talking about SEAL Team 6 and how they choose the people to be on SEAL Team 6. And it's the performance versus trust relationship model, where you've got people of incredibly high performance but low trust is a toxic person and a toxic leader. And then you might have someone who's a medium performer of high trust, who I would prefer to choose within that discipline, because you can always educate and they can always get better in their role. And it's about building your foundations around that. Now, that might not work for many organizations because they're hiring 50 roles at a time, for example. But in some organizations, that may apply. And I highly recommend they read Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. It talks all about those sorts of things.
Thank you. It's really good. We've got loads of questions coming in. I want to try and get these up because we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. If you need to go in 3 minutes, or you're all right to cover it? Right, I'll wipe my brow and chill a bit then. So here we go. Where are we? I think we've covered this one off already, Drew. But Simon Sinek, I think it is. Jonathan's just asked this. Sinek, I believe.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah, with a capital, clearly bad grammar, Simon. So Drew said, what about the resistance to change by the senior executives? I suppose we alluded to this earlier with regards to permissions and the fact that they don't need to have admin rights for everything just because they're hugely important and got a flashy job title. But how do you win them over when it comes to the resistance to change?
So it's an incredibly hard one, and the reason why is because
it's very dependent on each firm, I suppose, as well, isn't it? And the characters you've got.
And I'm really trying to not sit on the fence with all of these questions, because I appreciate
we don't have a fence here.
But it's incredibly difficult. And what I try to do is I tell them about experiences that I've had and understand it from their perspective. So why would I trust you? Why do I need your service? Why should I listen to you? What makes you a person to discuss my business, right? So if I was in that position, and I try to explain, that in some cases, so if it's security operations, prevention's better than cure. That mean time to detect, that mean time to respond. I've built not single-handedly by any stretch, but the security operations team within Stripe OLT. We are incredibly proud of our SLA. So we don't treat critical alerts any differently to other severities, because if you're a penetration tester, you're not going to go for the big bang exploit straight away. And so if you're leaving low or medium alerts for 24, 48 hours, you may have missed that initial kind of pivot or that lateral movement or that persistence within the network, right? And so I try to explain situations where those things have happened to executives, and I educate based on reality. And it's best with closed door, it's best in person, because you can talk about things with that real emotional connection where they go, okay, seeing is believing. I show them WannaCry. I show them different.
And it's relating it, isn't it, Ryan? I mean, you hit the nail on the head exactly with what I would have said, which is building up the relationships and having the trust there so people will listen to you in the first place. Once you've got that trust in place, it's then relating or explaining the risks or the issues to them in words and terms that they understand. And if it's the finance director, it could be the bottom line. If it's, the CEO, it could be, if he's got, like me, 6 children,
reputation
relatable.
Well, in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. We have to rattle through these. Next one. Here we go. We've got Sully. Thank you for jumping in, Sully. For someone making a career switch into cyber, how much do employers value non-IT skills? Love this. A candidate can bring to the table, given the candidate will have some certs, etc.
Sully, I don't know if you were here a little bit earlier on, but I was talking about retail experience. I was talking about experience where you're dealing with different situations. For me, I value it very, very highly. Different hiring managers within the business now, can see some of those intrinsic benefits, and that's why I'm trying to talk about these things. I talked about it at Cheltenham B-sides with different hiring strategies, different incentivizations for your team, but those key competencies and skills can show different qualities to how you may approach a different problem. Now, no single person within my team comes from the same background, the same walk of life. And that enables us. So as a part of our kind of service, if you like, we just make sure the right person's there for the job. And that may be not the person who's been there longest or the highest hierarchical perspective, because they might have worked in that industry for 6 years before they transitioned into a security discipline, whether if it's InfoSec, GRC, OSINT, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But if they come with that background and experience, they can understand the system and the pressures and the change relationships. And so I think that's something that's wrong with some of the hiring strategies at the moment, where people overlook some of those core competencies that people can bring to the table. It's hard to kind of denote how the industry perceive it, but I think over time you'll come across someone who values some of those key competencies.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ryan. And finally, let me just bring up this one. Jose, not sure what the pronunciation is, so apologies for getting it wrong. I'll call you both Jose, if that's okay. Taking on Sully K's question, how important are certs to a recruiter? Do you prefer the results of an interview with the? Yeah, I think if you look at the earlier chat that we had, we talked about this in quite great detail, didn't we, Ryan?
Yes, I think for some certain roles, right, you need the qualification. So if you're in the legal sector, or say you're working in defense, you need security clearance. That's a certification, if you like. It's checks and balances, and you need to be certified to be able to work in those disciplines. Completely different, because if you're doing government testing, so you're doing IT health checks, or you're doing CREST accredited testing, those sorts of things, you need the certifications to be able to fulfill that job. I personally, depending on the role, so for my entry level roles and some of my mid roles, a certification isn't going to define you. It shows that you've put yourself through the paces, for sure. It verifies some of the knowledge, but for me, that's not why you're going to be hired. It might get you some of the interview to an extent, and that's where certifications are perceived to be a benefit. There's no question they're a benefit. What I'm trying to say is, it's not the only way to achieve.
It's not going to be the be all and end all. Well, do you know what? That leads us on to a question that came up, and I'll drop it in because it came up in the LinkedIn post that we did earlier to promote the show, and it's this one. So, from a hiring can't talk. From a hiring perspective, how highly do you rate the use of sites such as Try Hack Me and Hack the Box? Love that question.
Sure. One of my closest friends works for Hack the Box and talks about the great things that people do on the platform, and I think it shows that level of self-devotion and dedication to a specific tradecraft. So that is particular to offensive security. Those platforms have just started to reach out into different CTF platforms, OSINT, some of those sorts of things, right? Largely speaking, offensive security. Now, I think probably 3 of my defensive team, so my SecOps team, working in the Security Operations Center, talked about the way that they were detailed orientated through Try Hack Me and Hack the Box, and understanding more and identifying some of those challenges, and want to be able to detect those issues for clients. Now, that shows me empathy. That shows me wanting to do something right. That's like, the emergency services side of things. It shows the way in which they wish to operate. So it's understanding the way the aggressor will operate in a way to be able to perform and do the kind of reactive services.
It's so important. Again, it's having the knowledge of not just the fact you're able to defend, it's what you're defending from, isn't it? And that's why I love, I suppose, the purple team in Angle, where you've got the red and the blue team working together throughout the test, discussing what's going on. So the blue team get to understand what's happening at certain points, what methods and vectors they're using. Got one more question, then I'm going to have to wrap things up because I'm fit to drop, if I'm honest with you. I've had a day of clearing houses today and it hasn't been too much fun. So Eliza has asked, does Stripe, I think I know the answer, but it might be teeing you up for some future information. Does Stripe OLT offer any cyber jobs in the US?
At this moment, I'm sadly not. No, but that's,
is that a watch this space? Sounds like it
today, right? Who knows what the future holds? To be honest, I'm not going to sit here and promise or say certain things, because at this moment in time, I don't know what the future holds. But then again, follow us on the appropriate platforms. And I think that's the best I can offer at this moment, I'm afraid.
That's good. And sorry for putting you on
Simon,
the spot.
just on the purple thing, on the purple
Yeah,
teaming
of
side,
course.
I think if you're interested in being a pen tester, don't necessarily just shut that door, because there's different ways in which you can itch that scratch, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean. I've had lots of people apply for different roles and say, "Oh, I really want to be a pen tester down the line," and they've chosen to stay in the kind of the blue team side of things, defending businesses and protecting clients and operating that way. Because on the red team, it's very fast paced. Now we have a fantastic offsec team, right? They've got CVs to their names and work fantastically. But the way we operate internally provides opportunities for the blue team to operate with the red team and create high fidelity alerting. And so when something like Log4j comes out, we're exploiting it and we're getting some of that information to hand and sharing it with the community. So if that's a passion project or something that you're doing, working on Try Hack Me and Hack the Box, there's different ways into the industry, and I think you can pivot around, and tasting a few things might not be the worst idea.
I completely agree, and I think I've mentioned my failure of OSCP so many times on these shows now, but again, it's understanding that there are so many other jobs out there other
Mm.
than the typical pen tester or SOC analyst. There's all the support roles around that. There's lots of different ways in, and I'm going to wrap things up now, Ryan, and thank you so much for your time. Before I start rambling on my end of show credits, any wise words for people before we go?
Um, Thank you for talking to me today. Sorry for going slightly over time.
No, pleasure.
I think there's quite a few questions we've not got to. If you send me a message on LinkedIn or comment on one of my recent posts or something like that, I will do my best to get back to you. It might take a little while, but I think it's very important that people try and provide guidance and assistance. Now, this is just my perspective. Lots of people will see things differently, but that's part of it, and that's okay.
Absolutely. And I think another question's coming in. It's a great one. So I'm going to bring it up. I know I said that I'm tired, but the whole point of these is to share experience. And Janeba, you've put, what advice do you have for us who wants to take cybersecurity as a career path? My advice is to look at your skills, look at what you're good at, look at what you enjoy, and then look at the over 50 roles that there are available in cybersecurity as to which one you think is going to suit you before going off down a rabbit hole like I did for pen testing, when in reality, I'd never be a particularly good pen tester. And this isn't a sales pitch, but there's a website, I'll drop it in here, called mycyberpath.com. They offer a free version. We're going to be giving away some of the paid versions, which I think is only about $20-$30 for the year anyway. We're going to be giving some away in the next couple of weeks. But this puts you through personality and psychometric questions that then looks at the roles that you'd be suited to. And what it then does is gives you links through to all the different jobs and all the different jobs boards. So you can look to see what certs you need, what experience you need, and actually start to plan out a roadmap. There are other sites the same. The only experience I've got is my CyberPath, so that's why I'm talking about it. So whilst it's not a personal recommendation, I have used it myself, and it told me I shouldn't be a pen tester, so I know that bit's right at least. So, Ryan, thank you very much. Everyone in the chat, thank you for jumping in. You may have noticed when Ryan was speaking earlier, I'm just going to get the chat off the screen so I can make this a bit bigger for a second, that I messed around with my background. And let me just take you off screen for 1 second, Ryan, while I do this, because tomorrow, if I can pull this across here and get rid of my face, no, it's not going to work, is it? Here we go. Can we see that? So tomorrow, we get rid of Ryan, 1 second. Tomorrow at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time, which is 4:30, I believe, British Summer Time, I'm taking on Eric Taylor in a red versus blue challenge with ThreatGen. And for anyone who hasn't been on the ThreatGen platform or seen any of these events before, it's a gamified cybersecurity learning experience, and it is masses of fun. So I'm a novice. Eric is instant response, decades of experience in cyber. Can I smash down the blue team tomorrow is the question. And I'm hoping I'm going to get the event up later. So get the links up on screen and on LinkedIn and on YouTube for everyone. Be great if you could tune in. And everyone, from me and from Ryan, who I'll now bring on back on the screen, a massive thank you for tuning in. Thanks for making it so interactive. And I'm going to play us out with a little promo for another series that we do, which is the CISO experience. So if you've got any CISOs watching and want to be on the show, please do reach out. It's all about sharing best ideas and practice. And also, please like and subscribe. So we hit 1,000 subscribers on Friday, and we're up to 1,642 today. No idea how that's happened, but I said this on the last show. My 13-year-old's fuming because he wanted to be a YouTuber. Now his nearly 50-year-old dad's got more followers and subscribers than him. So keep them coming in just so I can annoy my son, please. That would be amazing. Ryan, thank you so much, everyone. See you soon.
Take care. Cheers.